For getting out and being here, feels appropriate. We have a 1 of 3-part series on fish stories on a rainy day. So this is perfect. Good job, JR, in ordering the weather for this day. But welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Smith. I'm the Director of Community and Government Relations here at Grinnell College. Great to have everyone here today. Today is, like I said earlier, 1 of 3-part series from Dr. J.R. Paulson about stories, fish stories from the Great Lakes. So please plan to join us these next 3 Wednesdays. And then that will be the end of our bucket courses for this academic year. I'm excited to have you guys be here for the next 3 weeks, and I think this will be a really great way to end our year with JR. A couple notes. Today, the next 3 Wednesdays, we are going to go until 11:30. But please feel free to get up, walk around. For those who maybe haven't been here a whole lot, bathrooms are around the corner here. So if you need those, please know that those are there. Refreshments, please get up, and if you need them at any point. But we'll take a break in about 45 minutes, we just talked about. So I'll give a polite signal to JR around that time to let us take a little break, and then we will resume. But it's great to have you here. A couple notes before we start. Please make sure that your phones are either silented or on vibrate or something, so we don't hear phone calls coming in. Also, we do have a tea coil in this room, so if you have that, please turn that on at this time. And then one last thing before I turn it over to JR, I do see a couple of my friends from our Development and Alumni Relations Office here today. And today at Grinnell College is a very important day. It is our Scarlet and Give Back Day. So today is our annual giving day. So if you have not made a contribution, a donation to Grinnell College today, please do so. We have several different, just go to our website, we have a lot of different challenges going, so it'd be great if you are interested in making a donation. Roman and Adam, I still need to make mine, so President Harris does her donation. If so many faculty and staff give, then she and her spouse will give a donation to the college as well, so I gotta get mine in today yet, but please go out there and make a donation if you would like. All right, well, let's hand it over to an amazing speaker. I'm excited to hear. I got a little bit of a preview of what this talk would be like, and I'm excited to actually see it now in slides and in person, so please, will you help me welcome Dr. J.R. Paulson.
Coming out on a rainy day. How's the sound test in the back, Bob?
Good.
Fergie, can you hear? All right. Fish stories from the Great Lakes. And I like this one. The sun's behind it and say, nah, this is the fish Dad caught. Now, the inspiration for these presentations came from 2 sources. One, a book we read for our book club about 6 years ago. Mari, I can't remember. Excellent book by Dan Egan. And a lot of the things that he wrote in here, I will reiterate, but had to update and go into further detail. That was the first inspiration. The second one was my class reunion. Last September, I went back to Port Huron for my, hate to say it, 60th high school class reunion. And in the hometown of Port Huron in September. Now, our class motto in Port Huron High was, what's the greatest class alive? Class of 1965. We chant that in assemblies, on bus trips, on everything, every place we went. And we had competition with other classes. Some of you don't believe that's the best class. Read these 2 books, Bowling Alone, the revised edition, and Free Range Kids, and talk to me later about that. Over a span of 75 years, between my first swimming in Lake Huron and my second swimming, that's me, It's about 75 years. Swam in the lake. Now that's a picture of my two boys and our good friends, the Kreitziger kids, in front of the lake. But can one really swim in the same lake twice? Zen, Cohen, and Heraclitus say no. And most of you are familiar with this, but no man can ever step twice in the same river because you're not the same person, I'm not, than it was when I first swam in the lake. And the river isn't the same. So the whole theme of this is the lake is not the same. It might have been the same when my father, who grew up in Marquette, Michigan, when he first swam in it, at the end of his life swam in it, there probably wasn't much change. But you're here to see today that there's been lots of changes. Fishing has always been an important part for those of us growing up near a lake. My son Sean showing off one of his catches. And Mark, big fish he caught. This is an important year. He did catch this in the Amazon. Now, the Great Lakes are the greatest freshwater ecosystem in the world. Together, they contain 1/5 of all of the fresh water on the planet. They're formed over 10,000 years ago when the last glaciation retreated. Since then, the Great Lakes have become isolated from the oceans, and they have had plenty of time to develop their own balanced ecosystem of flora and fauna. Great Lakes are bounded by 8 states. Whoever made this map goofed up because they didn't have New York State colored in, but New York obviously borders it. And, of course, Canada. See the line going through the middle of the lakes? The Canadian side and our side. Which brings me to another key topic, which will go all through this, is who owns the Great Lakes? Who does or should control its waters? Fishing rights and use. Should be Michigan, Ohio, Lake Erie, should be Canada. Who owns that? And we'll come back to that again and again throughout the talk. Those of you that took Latin can read this. It's the Michigan motto. It says, if you seek a pleasant peninsula, look around you. Topics to be covered in this trilogy are my personal history, and we'll start with that. Both of my hometown of Port Huron, which I'll emphasize at the start. Michigan itself, because I've been around different parts of the Great Lakes in Michigan, and Iowa. I've lived half my life in Iowa, over half now. And I'm going to bring the fish stories back to Iowa and see what we can learn from them. So it's a history of fishing in the Great Lakes, abbreviated, of course. Man-made changes in the lakes. What are the changing fish populations over time? And the ecological consequences of AIS, which stands for Aquatic Invasive Species, later also for Alien Invasive Species, but mainly in the water. And the focus in this first one is going to be on the sea lamprey. And we'll preview other fish stories to come. My main goal is to show how disruptions at different points in the environment and food web can have profound and lasting effects in other areas and on other species. And as a corollary, how man's intervention in the ecosystem can have significant and far-reaching ramifications, often not realized until it's too late. So, those of you that need a map of Michigan, you always have one on your left paw. And that arrow highlights where I grew up. I was born in Detroit, as was my wife, in the same hospital, by the way, Henry Ford Hospital. I grew up in Port Huron. So let's talk a little bit about Port Huron. During the War of 1812, the United States wanted a fort to guard this important narrows, and they built Fort Gratiot. Later, with the surge of vessel traffic on Lake Huron in the early 1800s, the need for a light station to guide vessels through the waterways became very important. In 1823, Congress approved funds to build the first lighthouse in Michigan, and it's now the oldest functioning lighthouse in the Great Lakes. During the class reunion, I climbed up and took this picture from it looking south toward the bridges. The first blue water bridge was built in 1938. The only other bridge to Canada from the lower peninsula is the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit, 60 miles to the south. A second bridge was completed in 1997. How many of you have ever driven across it in travels to Canada? Yeah, some of you have. Below it runs the St. Clair River, which is 1,200 feet wide at its narrowest point. Since all three of the upper lakes drain through this point, the channel is a very fast and dangerous current. And of course, some of you will recognize, here's the bridge, and this is a picture of the blue water bridges viewed from our class reunion boat. We had our group took a tour on the boat to go up the St. Clair River and into the lake. And some of you saw my friendly mug around here. That what's nice about Lake Huron still is it's shark-free and unsalted. Going up the lake and the beach were omnipresent. Those of you that have ever grown up on a lake or a beach can relate. We go to the beach after playing baseball all day or working our jobs. Often we're outside and hang out for the rest of the day. On weekends, we'd often go to the beach at night, build a fire, drink A&W root beer. We never drank alcohol at any of these groups, and sing the songs of Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, the Kingston Trail, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and discuss the meaning of life under the stars. By the way, in case you didn't notice, my face was recently cryo-treated by my friendly dermatologist due to overexposure to light UV rays being out on the beach and outside 40 years ago. So still seeing the effects of that. This is a statue of Port Huron's most famous native son, other than me. Anyone heard of Thomas Alva Edison? Well, he was born 100 years before me and grew up right on that spot. Besides Edison, Port Huron is famous for its annual boat race, which was first held in July 1925. Port Huron to Mackinac races. This is a picture of the boats the night before the race on the Black River, which runs into the St. Clair River. It's a pretty wild and raucous affair. This shows a few of the boats at the start of the race, way out in the lake, with over 200 boats participating in different classes. It's one of the longest freshwater races in the world. It was rumored that some idiot from our class paddled his homemade kayak out to a start and even dared go through the rapids under the bridge. But sailing on the Great Lakes can be dangerous. Navigating the St. Clair River can be very challenging, especially to overseas captains. And for that reason, temporary pilots are taken from Port Huron, where they're based, taken aboard to steer these overseas boats through the St. Clair River, either down into the Detroit River or coming the other way. They pilot them from down there, they get up in the lakes, and the little boat goes out, pilot gets off, because it's just very treacherous. This is what happened to one of the freighters late in 2025. One of my friends sent me this picture. Fortunately, disaster was nearly averted. Take a look at that. Imagine having this freighter tooling down there under the bridge and can't stop, and you go like, whoa, not good. Nevertheless, many boats have not escaped the wild, stormy weather of the Great Lakes, especially in the month of November. Great storm of 1913. It's called the White Hurricane. It lasted for 5 days. Gale force winds. Waves were 30 to 35 feet high in freezing temperatures. And the waves are much closer together in the Great Lakes than they are in the ocean. The ocean, you can ride them out, but they become very close in the Great Lakes. Often boats could be completely encased in ice. So newspaper headlines of the storm. Maybe 273 dead on that particular storm. However, few people are aware that the staggering statistics of these tragedies. So this is a map of some of the Great Lakes, great wrecks, but highlighted the two things at the top. There's been over 6,000 shipwrecks in the Great Lakes, with over 30,000 lives lost. That's an incredible number. You think of the oceans of the world. So it can be very dangerous. Old wrecks like this one from the 1600s, the Griffin is well preserved by the cold water. I had one of my 2 experiences with hypothermia when snorkeling down to a wreck like this off Tobermory in the Bruce Peninsula in Canada. This arrow points to the most well-known and infamous wreck of our time. It was immortalized in the music by Gordon Lightfoot, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Are you familiar with that? And the Edmund Fitzgerald was an ultra-modern 730-foot freighter, was touted as unsinkable. And the arrow points to its final resting place. It headed out from on the western part of Lake Superior, and it kept in touch with another boat, Arthur M. Anderson. They were riding the storm out, but they kept in good contact. And then suddenly, they were in constant communication, and then all of a sudden, no communication. This is an artist's rendition of the Fitzgerald moments before its sinking. No bodies were ever discovered. So this is the first few stanzas of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitchigumi. The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy. With a load iron ore 26,000 tons more than the Edmund Fitzgerald weighed empty. That good ship and true was a bone to be chewed when the gales of November came early. Very powerful song, right, that I just remember. On November 25th, 1859, Charles Darwin released The Origin of the Species. But it was 20 years after his voyage of the Beagle that he, and then of course he talked about natural selection and evolution. So during this presentation, we're going to review some of his principles. But some of the things that I'm going to talk about, he would be turning over in his grave now of what's happened. And I'll make those points clear. We'll talk about his themes. So a few of my Michigan memories, and then we'll get into the fish. Paddle to the sea. All of us in Michigan, and you know who you are, who grew up, we grew up reading Paddle to the Sea. If you haven't ever read it, it's great. As an adult, you can read it. It's a children's book, and it was written by Austin Jones' uncle. So it's very famous, but it's just excellent. Anybody wants to take a look at that after. But you just learn all about it through this little boat that this Indian kid carves way up in Lake Superior, and he puts it in the water and just says, "Go, little boat," and the boat's going to on its way to the ocean. And each story is about that. A high point in elementary school was when every third grade class took a trip through this tunnel under the St. Clair River. And it was the first underwater rail tunnel in North America. And it was constructed in 1891. Before that, trains that came to Port Huron or the lakes, how do you get across to Canada? They have to be loaded on barges and ferries, hauled across, and then put together back on a train. So this was really a big engineering feat of the day. This is a picture of some lodges over in Canada, Red Bay Lodge. And the arrow shows where my family and I used to go every summer. My dad had 2 weeks off, he was a school administrator, and one of the weeks we went to Red Bay Lodge and went fishing. And we sat there, and fond memories of that. The other arrow, just another part of the Great Lakes up there that I have fond memories of is Isle Royale. And Isle Royale is National Park, if you're not familiar with it, 42 miles long, multiple ecosystems. It's famous for the balance of moose and wolves. And Russ and Barb Tavern spent how many summers living there in the fire tower?
3.
3? So if you want to talk to them about Isle Royale, they'd be very happy to. After we moved to Iowa, Linda's parents bought a cabin on Nevish Island, St. Mary's River. You can see where that is, where we often visited. Linda and I also attended, I did an arrow there highlight on Mackinac Island, an allergy conference. Any of you ever been to Mackinac Island? That's a very cool place that's just to put on the bucket list. This is the view from the dock in front of Linda's parents' cabin. They had a large poster of flags up in the living room. So when a boat would go by, you look at the flag and you could look it up in the what country. Oh, that came from Turkey. Oh, that came from Paraguay. Oh, that came from whatever. So that was pretty neat. And I'll return to that theme in the second portion. Well, let's get on to fish. Because it is about fish stories, but I wanted to give you that background. So the 3 types of fishing: subsistence fishing, commercial fishing, and sport fishing. No hooks, no rods and reels, no problem for indigenous Indians. They can make weirs and nets and catch fish without any problem, which they did. What fish did they fish for? What fish inhabited the Great Lakes back then? Well, that's just a few of them. I'm not going to go into any detail on so many of them. However, several of them are key that we need to talk about. So the key fish in this presentation, for the first part, are lake trout, whitefish, Atlantic salmon, lake herring, and sturgeon. So lake trout is the most important fish. It's the apex predator, known for its cold, deep water habitat. Whitefish, another deep water fish, delicate flavor. Our family used to go on Friday nights down to the Lake St. Clair, to the pilot house, and have whitefish or pickerel every Friday night. Atlantic salmon, native species. I didn't know this till I did this presentation. I'm going like, wait, salmon in the Great Lakes? Where'd they come from? Oh, Atlantic salmon. Lake Ontario. Oh, very interesting. I didn't know. Lake herring or ciscos, medium-sized schooling fish, about this big. Big fish eat those. Sturgeon, a long life bottom-dwelling fish that can grow to great lengths and reach incredible ages. So let's briefly take a look at those. This is the classic Atlantic salmon. They came out the St. Lawrence Seaway right into Lake Ontario, where it adapted and proliferated. Average one, 12 to 30 inches long. Whitefish, which is our family's favorite Friday night fish. And the whitefish, they're also native to North America, found in clear, cold lakes. They grow about 1 to 2 feet in length. Excellent flavor. They feed on zooplankton, small fish, aquatic insects. And they are both a sport fish that you can catch and angle for, but also a commercial fish. There are many types of lake herring, and they come in various sizes. They're also called ciscos. Now, what's important about all these schooling fish like the herring, is that they school. Well, and I'll come back, that's got its positives and negatives. Like herring on the decline. This is up from note from Green Bay. Anyone know what kind of fish that is? It's a sturgeon. This gentle giant dwells in the shallow bottoms of rivers and lakes, foraging for small fish, crustaceans, and insects. Made plant material, algae. They found a very successful ecological niche because they've been around at least 150 million years. And they've outlived the dinosaurs. Excuse me. But through the 1800s, desire for caviar led to overfishing. They'd catch them, get all the eggs out, and usually just throw them away. And finally, there are very few left in the Great Lakes and up in Saskatchewan River. They still had them and harvested them, but you can see by 1995, no more commercial fishing for the sturgeon. Now, they were nearly fished to extinction, but not completely. Now they're tightly regulated and some stocking occurs. They grow pretty big. Wow. Now that's one big freshwater fish. Excuse me. But they can live to over 100 years of age. That's how they can grow to such size. Now how do we know? How old's a fish? Well, it's like tree rings. We found out you can take a look at the scales on a fish and figure out how old it is. Something I just learned about too, doing this. And, gee, for instance, the St. Clair River. Lake St. Clair, the St. Clair River supports the largest remaining population of free-ranging lake salmon. Have you seen that picture? The arrow shows, oh, that's the bridge you just showed us earlier. The Blue Water Bridge. Ever seen that bridge before? And finally, the prize fish and top predator of the Great Lakes, the lake trout. What a beautiful fish. This is an average size of a lake trout. And this is a trophy size lake trout. Now, I want to emphasize several points here about the lake trout. They're a member of the salmon family, which I did not know. But they couldn't be different in so many ways. Salmon, as most of you know, spend their youth in freshwater streams and rivers before descending to the ocean, where they feed and grow for about 2 to 3 years, fatten up, then return to their native spawning rivers to spawn and die. Salmon can go up to 100 pounds in that short time because they feed on all these schooling fish. But if they can't get enough to eat, they eventually weaken and die. The lake trout spend all of their life in the lakes. They prefer cold water, 50 to 200 feet deep. They can live for decades, and they lay thousands of eggs every year. They thrive in frigid conditions that would starve a salmon. And this key point, you need to remember, they eat everything from plankton to insects to other fish. They've evolved over millions of years to weather long lean times. They've even got a special kind of fat that they can live on during these lean years. They only have to worry about eating and not worry about being eaten by a larger predator. They are the apex predator. And even with that being said, within the Great Lakes, trout have filled out multiple ecological niches available to them. There's 100 types of stock, and the stock is in a different species. And the Indians gave them different names: redfin, yellowfin, shoal trout, moss trout, greaseballs, paper bellies, brook trout, black trout. They would spawn at different times, different environments, and even during different seasons. Now, they show different behavior, growth rates, but again, they're the same species. So they've adapted not only all of these variations to whatever part of the Great Lakes they're living in, and the food supply. Let's talk about the salmon then in Lake Ontario. Salmon are usually associated with Pacific Coast and the Indians, but they're important around Lake Ontario. Algonquin and the Iroquois peoples, salmon was main food supply for them. Their method of catching the fish is shown in here. They go night, they have these big torches on fire up there. I guess that attracted the fish, and then they just go around and can spear them. Now, during pre-colonial times, it was a vital food supply. Communal activity with the Indians. They had indigenous knowledge of the ecosystems, and they informed sustainable fishing practices. Salmon fishing played a significant role in their cultural and spiritual traditions. But within a century or two, the immigrants coming in, they saw all this abundance of fish, and they said, wow, we're gonna get in on this. And then the next several centuries, commercial fishing. So now we're going out in big boats and nets, and we're not just getting it for subsistence, we're doing it for profit. And it didn't take long for the industry to become a giant part of the economy, very important in the United States and in Canada. But very early in the 19th century, swelling of Europeans, they would have to catch more and more of these and fill barrels and barrels of fish. And whitefish were plentiful beyond imagination. That was a quote. So not just the salmon, but also the whitefish. They didn't have any way of preserving freshly caught fish. They had to sell them locally. So it was a problem to get into distant markets. So salting fish was really important. You salted them, you put them in barrels, or pickled them. But by 1825, opening of the Erie Canal, salt mines in Goderich, right across from not too far north of Port Huron in Canada, and the railways changed all that. Now you could get the fish out to market. And of course, by the 1900s, ice. So now you don't have to, you can ship them, you freeze them, put them on ice, and take them all over the country. To do this, you had larger nets, you had larger catches. But in the long run, it's a sorry tale, because salmon declined over the next 100 to 150 years. And salmon in Lake Ontario completely disappeared by 1900. There's all these salmon. So we're saying, well, wow, how could you totally deplete a great lake of one species of fish? Two reasons. One, you probably overfished it. Okay, that's one. Nobody's going to regulate how much to get. But two, you cut off their spawning spots. So here's a picture. Where did the salmon go? They got to go up these little streams to spawn. Well, what did you do in the 18 to 1900s on every single stream? You put a mill there, didn't you? You put a mill and a dam. And you also had pollution. So the fish could not go up to spawn. On you couldn't find one of those lakes that wasn't blocked. So the combination of those took the salmon up. What about Lake Erie? Let's moving up the lake chain, as you can see. What was the history of fishing in Lake Erie? Well, one of the other major fish in the Great Lakes is herring, the ciscos. They played a historically crucial role in fishing for Lake Erie. They're a forage fish. They're not an apex predator, but overfishing and habitat degradation caused their populations to decline. By 1960, lake herring were nearly extirpated in that, and they were going away in some of the other lakes. Which brings us to this picture that I'd like you to, we'll come back to this again and again. This is the food chain. And you can see up at the top, you have the predator fish, salmon and lake trout. Then you see the mid-sized fish, and then, or the prey fish. Then layer down, zooplankton, algae, and then the bottom fish. And we'll talk about all of these. Well, unlike the bigger predator fish, these middle-sized fish school, which also made them easier to catch. Because you just find where school is and whoosh. They can literally be caught by the barrels fulls. But again, overfishing is one of the reasons that took them out. And eventually, they collapsed in Lake Michigan also. But in Lake Sheridan, Michigan, the takes of other fish continued to increase. And now we're having bigger boats, we're having nets, we're having we're using sonar location, we're doing all these things, but still, all these fish are still increasing. 1890s, 80 million pounds of lake trout. No matter where, there seemed to be an inexhaustible amount of trout, lake trout, way into the 40s. In 1940, over 100 million pounds of fish were harvested in the lakes. Then the collapse. In just several years during the 40s, the entire fish industry collapsed. Entire fish industry. Lake Michigan alone, the lake trout catch went from 6.4 million pounds in 44 to only 342,000 5 years later. And 5 years after that, it was zero. Now, I would call that an ecological meltdown. Here's a good example. 1950, 3 years after I was born, commercial fisherman in Waukegan, Illinois, takes his boat out on the trout beds of Lake Michigan. He sets 4 miles of net, 4 miles. He leaves it there several days. He goes out, let's haul all their nets up. He caught 6 small trout. 5 years earlier, he would have well produced over 6,000 pounds of fish. Commercial harvest in Lake Superior. You can read that graph. And the same with the whitefish. Take a look at, by 1960, what happened to the whitefish in the Great Lakes? They're gone, decimated. What were the causes of this dramatic fishery collapse? Any ideas?
The auto industry.
Nope. The auto industry. Nope. Because Lake Superior doesn't have any auto industry up there or pollution
Yes.
and stuff. And we'll get the pollution in Lake Erie in a little bit. Okay, so they're different things. Overfishing? Yeah, but you can't overfish. There weren't regulations. Yeah, there were regulatory fish. Nobody said you can take only this many fish. So that could be a factor. Ecosystem, yeah, there's more pollution, biodiversity, but the economic consequences of this crash in the whole Great Lakes is just devastating to all the Great Lakes states. Now, here's something else that goes into what you said. I don't know if you remember this, but in 1969, I was working at a steel factory in Port Huron, but one of my college roommates who was from Breckville, Ohio, was working in Cleveland. And I called him in 1969 and said, hey, I heard your river caught on fire. This was a big deal. I don't even remember this. But the Cuyahoga River caught on fire. It's burning. But it had caught on fire many times before. Steel plants along the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, they just dumped all their stuff into the lake. North, south of Detroit, why in that chemical? Dumped stuff in the lake. But again, as I said, the first time Cuyahoga River caught on fire was 1868. It's been catching on fire for a long time. But something was different in 1969, which I'm going to emphasize. It served as a precursor for the more famous, because of that famous river fire, galvanized the start of the environmental movement. People finally got pissed. In 1969, over half of all the lakes and all the rivers in the whole United States were polluted and horrible. I don't know the exact, but it was just the majority. People finally said, wait, we're letting industry, we're letting all these people destroy our environment, and they're starting to actually get mad and get politically activated. Well, there's somebody going down the Cuyahoga River. You want to go fishing? I don't think you're going to find any fish in there. Or let's go out to Lake Erie on the coast. Doesn't look much more promising or better out there. And then last, we're going to go forward to the dead zones. So other problems come up that we'll go over in big detail. 2010, much of Lake Erie is declared a dead zone. And so, what is this from? But now, it's not from industrial pollution, not from all these companies. It's from agricultural pollution. And by the third part, we're going to talk about Lake Erie pollution and bring that back to Iowa and our farming practices and whatever. So that's a preview of things to come. But one good thing come out of this Clean Water Act. Congress finally said, no, we're going to have quality standards for water. We're going to have, if you're putting a pipe and a discharge in here, we can find that, we check that, you're going to have to pre-treat that before you can put water in there. That's going to cost us a lot of money. We don't care. And they have real serious fines and teeth to reinforce that. So that was a big watershed moment. And federal funding to help clean it up. Now, we're all for point sources and say, here's the industry coming in here, but not what we call non-point sources. That's the agricultural runoff, which we're going to talk about later. So back to the Upper Lakes in the 40s. Of all the previous listed causes of the dramatic fish decline in the Upper Lakes, one turned out to be the big killer. Vampire of the Great Lakes. Meet the sea lamprey, and the central character of this discussion. We'll introduce him or her and then take a break. This is a 1 to 2 foot long beast from the past. And when I say from the past, I mean distant past. Not older than the sturgeon. This is 360 million years ago. This fish has not changed one bit over that time. Another nice little sea lamprey. If you want to know the anatomy, I can go back to this slide if you want. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel really sorry for this trout. I mean, here's this trout, got these 2 lamprey hooked on him. It's not going to get those off. If a fish wasn't sucked dry of blood and survived the attack, it was left weakened and scarred. It also makes a fish unappealing to sell to a restaurant and serve to customers. Would you like to eat that fish be served to you? I don't think so. Fishermen had to cut off more and more lampreys from their diminishing catches. Most of the catches now had either a lamprey attached, had scars, or markedly weakened or small. Here you're on a boat fishing, you gotta have half of your boat where you throw your pile of lampreys that you try to get off your trout or whitefish. So what we're going to do is take a few minute break and find out more about the lamprey and what we're going to do about this. It's just taking all the fish out of your lake. So what's the next move? So we'll have a little break and then Sarah will reconvene us in a few minutes.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's take about 5 minutes.
Fish snack. Even down a little bit more. That sound any better?
We'll go down.
Can you still
I'll keep
hear it in the
cranking the
back?
volume
Gordon?
down.
Oh, Gordon doesn't see. Bob, can you hear back there now? Okay, let's try that. Okay, so the sea lamprey, it's got a Latin name, means rock-sucking fish from the ocean. Translates. It's native to the Atlantic Ocean. They live out there all over the place, and the east coast of America. Because of their eel-like shape, they're sometimes confused with eels. And I've many times before I researched this called lamprey eels. They are not eels. One thing you take out of here, so you're educated, sea lamprey, don't put eel after it. Lampreys have no jaws, no true teeth, no paired fins, and a skeleton made of cartilage, true bone. They're different. Totally. Now, if you want to learn about eels, this is a great book I can recommend. The Book of Eels. Now, what's the timeline for the invasion of these guys? Well, some of them snuck in Lake Ontario in the 1880s. And by 1936, there was a few of them in Lake Huron, and a few up by Isle Royal in 46. But by the late 40s, you could find lampreys all over the Great Lakes. Which begs the question, how did they invade the upper Great Lakes? Since they had not been able to for tens of thousands of years. So why did they all of a sudden get in? Well, humans engineered two doors for them. And the first door was the Erie Canal. And the other door was the Welland Canal. Now, last summer was the bicentennial of the Erie Canal. And this shows you where the Erie Canal. It connects Albany, New York, and the upper Hudson River, which had a lot of lampreys in them, to Buffalo and Lake Erie. Now, it's 363 miles long. It was funded by New York State itself. They didn't have money. The federal government said, we're not interested. It's completed in 1825. And it was 40 feet wide and 4 feet deep, with 83 locks and 18 aqueducts. Pretty impressive structure. And economically, when it was done, it caused freight rates to plunge 90%. Compared to overland. So if you're trying to take a whole bunch of stuff overland on the roads back then, in carriages or wagons or anything for the railroad, it did not go well. So when you have this canal, it was really economically. And people could trade, they could move, it really helped the western expansion. It's an early drawing of the canal in the locks, one of the locks. It's another nice picture around Buffalo, New York. And the barges, if you know, were pulled by mules. Any of you know this folk song about the Erie Canal?
Oh, yeah.
It's one of my favorite. I like to play and sing it. I've got a mule and her name is Sal, 15 miles on the Erie Canal. She's a good old worker and a good old pal. 15 miles on the Erie Canal, and it goes on and on. But anyway, it tells you all about the Erie Canal. Well, population, people trying to transportation. Would you rather cruise on a boat across New York State like this in luxury, or take a rural road in carriages? So it became very popular. However, the canal also provided many routes of entry for sea lampreys. So this gave them an open door, plus all the other Finger Lakes in New York. It didn't have before. What about larger ocean-going boats? They can't go down this narrow canal. How do you get them into the upper lakes, which you want to do? This picture it's good for a lot of reasons. It shows you the depth, relative depth of all the Great Lakes and their distance above sea level. And you can see sea level in the St. Lawrence River and how deep Lake Erie is compared to Superior. And you see the Lake Erie is pretty shallow. But you see, oh, Niagara Falls there. Well, if you're an eel or anything else, you ain't gonna hop up Niagara Falls or salmon or anything else. Well, and we opened the Welland Canal. And 1829, just 4 years after the Erie Canal. First steam shovel used on the Welland Canal. And the Welland Canal connects Lake Ontario to Lake Erie. You don't have to go through the Niagara River. You don't have to go over the falls. And it has been worked on many different iterations over the years since it was first made. But the key thing now is that the maximum size vessel right now, 730 feet length, limited to the biggest lock, or the smallest lock, the beam 75 feet wide, and depth of 25 feet. And you'll find out later that a lot of lake freighters are bigger than that now. Well, they can't go through there. So there's still a limit of what can come in there. But now it's pretty easy for a sea lamprey to either just swim through the locks or hitch a ride on the boat. So now we see why the sea lamprey have taken off. Now, we know how the lampreys got into the Great Lakes, but how to deal with them. Before they decimate the last fish up in Lake Superior. Any of your ideas? Catch them, trap them. Well, if any of you read The Act of War by Sun Tzu, it's an excellent book on the war strategy of Chinese. And Sun Tzu said the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself. So Sun Tzu would spend a long time reconnaissance, studying his enemy before planning any strategy of attack. Gee, what a creative idea. So what information do we want to know? Historical data, environmental impact, are there any regulations, are there quotas, are there other invasive species? What's economic, what's going on? This is another book I got besides the Great Lakes book, Great Lakes Sea Lamprey. I got this from University of Michigan Press, 70 Years of War on a Biologic Invader. Now, there have been attempts before to get together and say, we got a fish problem here, and let's get on the same page. Because this is the whole Great Lakes now. So you got Michigan, you got Ohio, you got Canada, and saying, man, we got this decimated our fish thing. This is hurting all of us. What can we do about it? Well, let's get together and talk about it. Well, as this slide shows, up to the 50s, they tried 40 times to create a working group, let's get together and do that, and it didn't work. Politics mixed it in power control, whatever. Well, let's look at the data. I don't think you have to be an economist to read that, to interpret that. How many tons of fish you got, and then all of a sudden they go down, and gee, what's this other thing coming up? Oh, that's the sea lamprey in thousands. So duh, I think you found your culprit, you got the problem. You know your adversary, you know how many troops he's got. And by the time I was in high school then, most fishing of any type was in Lake Huron on the brink and most of the other lakes. So in high school, if I go, I'm gonna go fish for something, what I'm gonna fish for, it's not, nothing much is gonna happen. Because I'm trying to relate this to my life. So what do we know about our adversary? Sun Tzu said, you don't know anything, you better find out. Well, enter Vernon Applegate. He was a GI who came back to the University of Michigan, go blue, to pursue his PhD in biology. He started the year I was born. He spent 3 years living near 2 lamprey-infected rivers in northern Michigan, trying to figure this out. He wanted to find everything out about them. How they feed, how they breed, how they migrate, how they die. Eventually, how to eradicate them. His 334-page dissertation was hailed as a classic for the ages. You know, so important that they said it should go immediately to the Library of Congress for publication. And that is a cover of his Natural History of the Sea Lamprey in Michigan. Well, something else I learned. Gee, there's native lampreys in the Great Lakes. I didn't know that. I thought these guys are just coming in from the ocean. There's 4 native lamprey populations already that have been around for thousands of years, causing no problem. And 2 of them, the top 2, the American brook lamprey and the northern brook lamprey, they're not even parasitic. They don't attack other animals or hook onto anything. Isn't that interesting? And the silver and the chestnut lamprey are parasitic, but they can't attack big fish. They haven't changed the ecology of the Great Lakes at all. Gee, in this family portrait, which one do you think is the sea lamprey? Pretty obvious. Well, he followed the lamprey in the lakes, upstreams, in the mud, during sex, when feeding. He studied them in aquariums in his lab on the shore of Lake Huron. And this is what he found. That there are 4 cycles that the lamprey go through. Parasitic, spawning, larva, metamorphosis. Parasitic stage. This is what we're all familiar with. Having thermal sensors, the lamprey attach and find to only cold-blooded prey. And they like to attach just behind the gills and close to the heart. Then they have a beak-like tongue that rasps away the scales until it finds capillaries. Then they secrete anticoagulant to keep the blood flowing as it feeds. And in 1 year, it sucks enough blood to grow from the size of a little finger to the length of a forearm. Only 1 in 7 fish survive the attack. And those are greatly weakened. And a single lamprey can consume 30% of its body weight in blood per day. So when I said vampires of the Great Lakes, I don't think I was kidding. I didn't mention other thing. The lake trout and the whitefish were perfect targets. They're plentiful. They stay alive during this whole parasitic process, and they have soft scales. They're fat-filled, slow-growing fish, and they make ideal targets for the lamprey. In the ocean, the lamprey would feed on tuna, swordfish, and even sharks. But obviously it wouldn't bother them, and they never killed any of their hosts in their native spot out in the ocean. So here's the lamprey attaching onto the fish, just what we said. And here's a picture of a lamprey tongue. So with the hook on with all the teeth, and then you got this raspy tongue comes up and just bores until it gets inside the fish. Migration. They spend about 18 months in the lakes feeding, and then they migrate, looking for rivers to spawn. Although they have extremely good smell, they don't have to find an exact stream that they came from. like salmon do. They rather smell the odor given off by any river that has larvae in it, because those larvae just secrete this chemical and go by a river and go, ooh, I smell, this is good to go up. Chemical messenger. They travel only at night. They've been known to travel hundreds of miles upstream. During this time, their intestines involute. They shrink down to the size of a guitar string. Their livers undergo hepatic failure and turn green with degeneration and bile accumulation. Clearly, their days are numbered. Spawning. Lampreys typically build nests in gravel or sandy riverbeds. Males come by and make the nest using their bodies to move rocks and substrate. They make a depression to hold eggs. Then they attract females, which I didn't know, through vocalizations and pheromones. After mating, the females lay eggs in the nest, which the male then fertilizes. The nest provides protection from the eggs, from predators and currents. Spawning occurs mainly from May through July. Now here's a male building a nest. Research in the field, watching those nests. Male approaches the female, attaches with a sucker just behind her head, coils around her, and they both have 2 to 5 seconds of rapid orgasmic vibrations where she extrudes her eggs and he has milked her sperm. Freshly fertilized eggs coast downstream until they're caught in these rocky horseshoes, the nest. They think the sperm even have special odor detecting neurons. Then the parents anchor themselves on rocks upstream, shake their tails to get other debris to flow down the stream to cover the nest. Then they take a little break and repeat breeding over and over again until they are literally spent, usually about 16 hours, then both parents die. None of this takes place until the stream is greater than 50 degrees. Now, Applegate and his colleagues observed 945 nests, 338 sex acts. He found 71% of the nests had monogamous couples, 13% one male and 2 females. It's kind of interesting, exactly the same time he's doing this, Alfred Kinsey down at the University of Indiana is studying human sex and reproduction. A little cartoon of lamprey sex. There's some lampreys just starting to get together. Now, I guess that's the only way to really see what's going on with the sex. And so it's either a lucky or unlucky grad student that's probably, okay, John, you're going to go out and you're going to watch the lamprey sex for the professor. Okay, larval stage. The female produces about 150,000 eggs. It's a lot. But if only 3% of these live, that's 5,000 more offspring. After 10 to 12 days, they are no bigger than an eyelash. They stay in the rocks another week. They drift down. They look for sand and silt to burrow in. They're reclusive fillers. They just poke their heads up a little bit, filter some stuff, and go back in. There they remain. This is amazing. About 5 to 6 years in the stream milk, as long as up to 17, growing about an inch a year. And they're also, the larvae are called emotzites. And here's a picture of the size of one on your finger and some in the stream. You can see the little burrows they make. They just come up and just stick their heads up a little bit, fill with a little water, pull back down. Okay, third stage, metamorphosis, or first stage. No one knows why, when they start to transform. Usually after 5 years. They start getting eyes. This buccal hood becomes a suction mouth. They get gills redesigned. They have dorsal fins to help them be able to swim like a snake. They get the raspy tongue. And then, for some reason, all in mass, they go, nope, we're going downstream, head to the open Great Lake. Migration occurs late March and early April with the rising spring waters. Gee, it's a smart time to go. But before the temperature hits 41 degrees, researchers collecting migrating larvae. Now that Professor Applegate has provided us with ample and clear information about our enemy, how or should we proceed? And here we can have a long discussion on, well, what ideas you got? Okay, we found all this. Well, here's a weak spot. What about here? What about here? We'll just give you some ideas. Control the lamprey in time to save the stock in Lake Superior. So we better get moving. And use them in a breeding program to restore trout in Lake Michigan and Huron. Use as many methods as possible. You just don't have to have one. Our goal, obviously, is to eradicate it. But he decides that's not going to be feasible. We're going to need a poison that would destroy the lamprey without wiping out other species that none existed at that time. Well, as I mentioned, this lamprey problem was so huge, and to eradicate it would be so large, and money, and you got to get everybody agreed. So finally, they're able to form the Great Lakes Fishery Commission as a focal point. People from Canada, United States together and say, okay, we got all the data here. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to do this? So now we're at least getting together. But the money started basically at Michigan, from Michigan. So, identify where they're at. That's important. What streams have them, what don't. Sell them as food. Let's market these guys. Put a bounty on them. $5 for every lamprey. You get all the kids going out looking for lampreys. Kill them when they're headed upstream. Electrocute them in the mud. Catch them when they're migrating back to the lakes. Find or introduce a predator that likes to eat them. Find a piscicide, which is the fish killer. It kills only the lamprey larvae. Use genetic or pheromone manipulation against them. Remember, they follow these pheromones. But back then, they didn't have a clue what pheromones were, and they weren't even discovered yet. Well, easiest to do, gauge the public's health. So if you see a lamprey in this stream, please let your DNR know, or take a picture of it, or bring it in. Well, let's try to cook it. Some people wanted to buy and sell them. It's a little hard to sell. Romans and English liked them, but somebody quoted, it smells like a mixture of fish, mud, and melted plastic. And it was famous, however, in the English, called coronation pie. So whenever the new ruler in England was coronated, king or queen, the city of Gloucester always made this great pie for them and presented it to the new monarch. Well, you can do a spawning weir and kind of trap them when they're going upriver. Why don't you use a DC current and barrier and electrocute them? Or when they're in the larva stage, you can walk around with a power pack on your back and two big paddles, different voltages, or must be DC, and you zap the mud all around, and of course if there's any guys in between there, they're going to get fried, the larva. You can screen trap them after they're coming down and going back to the lakes. Why don't you try to catch them? Well, that works. Look at all these little baby metamorphosized guys that are headed to the ocean that you caught in your trap. But finding a pesticide is the most important. After receiving his PhD in 1950, Applegate was hired by the state of Michigan, and went back to the newly refurbished Hammond Bay Biologic Station to lead the group. He's looking for a chemical silver bullet. This was in the early 50s. And where's Hammond Bay? Right up there. That's where he did his PhD research. Then he began testing thousands of chemicals. It could possibly kill lamprey larvae, but not kill other fish. Here, Cliff Cortman would measure out the chemicals with a triple balance scale, add them to 10-gallon jars. So all these 10-gallon jars, and all of them had 2 lamprey larvae, a small rainbow trout, and a bluegill. Put the chemical in it, back next day, see what happened. Initially, they would test 40 to 50 chemicals a day. They were sent thousands of samples, because at that time, there was 10,000 patent applications for various pesticides. So lots of chemicals out there. They only had a number. They said, well, if you find something, we want the patent rights on that. So they didn't even know what it was. But they didn't get discouraged and they kept hunting. Finally, August 21st, 1956. When did he start? 50. 6 years later, this guy came in the lab and found what he was hoping for. 2 stiff, dead larvae, a healthy swimming bluegill, and trout. And they looked in that, and there's this chemical, trifluoromethane, nitrophenol, they just called it TFM. And they said, this looks really good. But they'd already found one that was kind of close, almost as good, called Dowlap. Dowlap was number 174. And it showed, as promised, they were getting ready to field test it. You can't just do this in the lab with a tin, with a jar. So, in October of 57, I'm 10 years of age this time, they field tested this in Little Billy's Creek up by Millsburg, Michigan, which emptied into Hammond Bay. Now, it wasn't made public because they're just checking this out. They had some other holding cages of 1,200 other larvae from other streams as controls. In science, you gotta have controls here. You can't just, well, we killed them off in this stream. Well, how do you know? Well, we bring some others in and let's put these guys in and see if you kill them too. They used a style lab and reached a concentration of 30 points per million. But they had a kill rate of 96%, but no other non-target fish or mortality. Looking good. And downstream, they had 100% of the cage deaths. So all the guys they had in the cage that they brought over, they're all history. So this is looking good. But this chemical is still too concentrated, and it's going to cost too much to do. It's just not going to be feasible. So later, they go back to this chemical that they found, and it was called number 5,294, and they did a test of that in the Mosquito River, tributary of Lake Superior. It had a kill rate of 99%. Could be used at a lower concentration of only 3 parts per million, and could be produced cheaper by Dow. So that's what you want. So at that point, sea lamprey is defeated in Great Lakes. Well, not quite, but you got to do that. But see, 20 years before lake trout is restored. And the chemical was considered the silver bullet, but now you got to apply it to the streams and rivers across the whole Great Lakes region. Well, take a look at that. These are all the streams that got lampreys in them. You got to treat every one of those streams. Who's going to pay for that? Who's going to do that? How often are you going to do that? It's going to test all that. It's really going to require some cooperation between the United States and Canada. And because of the states knocking out the whole fish industry, if you don't get the lamprey out of there, there's no chance anything's going to come back. They got together and did it. So here, they're bringing a helicopter way into a remote area north of Lake Superior in the Pick River to get this. Well, did it work? Take a look at that graph. 90% reduction in the sea lamprey populations. So that is really impressive. And that takes us up to about 2020. So now this is just a poster from last year in May. Notice this river is going to be treated with lampricide. What you need to know about it. Now, they apply it to streams in 3 to 10 year intervals. They still use electric shocks. They still use barrier dams. They're experimenting with these pheromones now to track and catch the lamprey. And they get some sterile lamprey males and try to send them out into the environment to help goof things up for the lamprey. And the pheromone is really neat now because they've developed that. So now you're gonna trick the lamprey, you put some of this pheromone out, they go to this, you trap them, you throw the females away, and the males sterilized, and you send them back out into the environment. Now, you're all asking, so did I, say, okay, yeah, but what's... TMF does not accumulate since it breaks down within several days. So it's not accumulating in the environment, and it's not killing other fish, fauna, and stuff. And how many years have we watched this? Since '56. So by now, we would find some big problems. Now, politics. Oh, we gotta cut that. It says Trump. Hey. What was that gonna do? Because the lamprey get ahead of us. Now, the last 10 minutes, we're gonna talk about 2 Great Lakes small fish and why they matter. One was invited and one was not. This is the role of the prey fish. First one, rainbow smelt. And they spawn in the spring. The little fish, they're normal in the Delaware River. Well, that's not the Great Lakes. And they brought into Crystal Lake, up in Michigan, right here. Well, that's kind of dumb. They thought they'd bring them up there to feed the big fish and you can catch them yourself. But it's right next to the Great Lake. So, of course, they get out of the Great Lake and then they get into Lake Michigan. Well, what happens when they get into Lake Michigan? They're not a native species. Okay. And so they were intentionally introduced, but it didn't go well. And there's where they were introduced. Now, they'd be saying, they just took over. There's smell all over the place. So now you got this new fish, smelt, and they're all over the place. So you can smelt dip. You can cook them. They're good. You don't have to clean them. You don't have to take them apart or anything. They make great eating when they're cooked right. You don't have to scale them or anything. In the spring, there's all these runs all over around these rivers. You just go out with a net and dip them up. There's thousands of them. Hundreds of thousands. I remember going down under the blue water again as a 10-year-old kid watching hordes of people with their long smelt nets quickly fill up 55-gallon plastic barrels. Just dip them up, put them in. I've only used my smelt net in Iowa to catch bats in our house. To understand why they become invasive in Michigan, consider these points. They were introduced for, sports and good food for the higher predator fish. But there aren't higher predator fish anymore now. They produce rapidly, outcompeting native fish. The present disrupts the ecosystems. Take a look at this. The light brown is their native range. The dark brown is where they've spread to. It's pretty impressive. This poster put up in Canada, up by Hudson Bay. It says, if you see any of these guys, report them to your DNR, because we want to keep them out of Hudson Bay. Leopold recognized the importance of apex predators, like bears and wolves, for decades before anybody talked about apex predators. So what did these smelt? What was going on with them? Well, smell could be good or bad for an ecosystem, depending on the health of the system. And Great Lakes was really unhealthy because we don't have top predators. So positive, yeah, it can be food source for predators if you had any, and it can be sport fish. You can eat it and cook them. But the negative, with depleted predators, population explosion. Nobody controls them. Smell go nuts. As schoolers, they swarm in huge packs. And the packs come around and eat the eggs and young of trout and whitefish. So imagine you're whitefish or trout, you lay all your eggs, or you got your babies there in this rock someplace, and then here comes 100,000 swarm of the smelt. Eat all your babies and eat all the eggs. So what's happened to those fish? Not well. And they even found if you're a whitefish don't have teeth. So the whitefish, oh, well, I'll eat some of these, this will be good. But then their stomach doesn't know how to dissolve that bone, that bony jaw. So it just blocks up their intestinal tract, and they can't poop it out, or it eats a hole right through their stomach, and they wither and die. But the fish think they're getting a good deal. Okay, importance of prey fish. We've talked about smelt. Now we've got to talk about a second one in the next 5 minutes, alewife. Now, I'll show this graph again in the future. Look at what happened, the smelt, huge spike, and then the smelt go down. That other area going up there, the alewife. We'll come back to that. So, it's a species of herring found in North America. It's a shad. It's a marine species. Northern Atlantic Ocean. Breeds in freshwater habitats, but it made it into the Great Lakes. Well, duh, how to get in the Great Lakes? Same way as everything else did, those canals. Same way the lamprey did. So it's spread over time, but it's not eaten by the lamprey because it's too little. No natural predators, they're going nuts now. They school also, so they're not very good for the native fish. By 62, they accounted for 70% of the fish mass in Lake Michigan. And this statistic, 3 years later, when I graduated from high school, this one little fish was 90% of all the mass of the Great Lakes. 90% in that amount of time. Now, the alewives were completely able to outcompete the other fish. Alewife impels Great Lakes fishing. Put your net down, all you're going to get is the alewives. You can sell them for cat food, or my cousin who was on a mink farm, they could get them for fertilizer, but not much else. This picture is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, it's 67. It's the Lake Michigan in Chicago. So you walk down by the lake, that's what you found. Piles, often a foot deep, of dead alewives. Chicago had to hire all their workers to get shovels and go out on a periodic and try to clear, because they're rotting, they're stinking, they're having flies. So there's this huge die-off of all these in the late 60s. If you witnessed that or smelled that, it's unbelievable. Gee, call for war on alewife problem. Michigan Tourist Council. Who wants to go to a beach with that? Are you going to go fish? There's nothing to fish for. Those are alewives. So things are not looking good, folks. And here's the alewives. So in about the 60s, they're the top thing. So these are all the small-sized fish. The lake herring, you see they were decimated. Then the smelt, oh, they went down. But gee, they went down because the alewives could outcompete them. And they drove them all. Okay. So this is in shambles from the invasion of the non-native species. They finally said, we got a problem with this. So the United States and Canada got together to try to fight this, and Canada helped. Joe, and it's going to lead us into a little bit of what's going to happen. So in '64, so I'm graduating from high school, one man from Michigan State University was asked to come back to Michigan to help clear this problem up. And he decided that he's got to do something about the alewife. Restocking the trout isn't working. So he decides that he's going to bring an exotic predator in that will not only eat the alewives, but will be a great sports fish. And so what does he do? He thinks about the Atlantic bass, but in '66 he brings coho salmon eggs, puts them up by Traverse City. No one knew what would happen, but the results were wildly spectacular on many fronts. Michigan and surrounding states would start stocking. So by 67, 1 million coho, 2 million Chinook, and 1 million lake trout in 67. The Chinook are bigger, they go over to 40 pounds. So welcome first coho, then Chinook salmon to the Great Lakes. And the Chinook can reach 20, 25 pounds or more, and they just love alewives. And so now you've got an economic engine. You're getting these coho to eat the Chinook, and then guess what? Michigan fishing is back. Now people are coming from all over the world to look for these fish and fish in the Great Lakes, particularly Lake Michigan. And some of the Chinook are pretty big. So how'd you like to go out on your fishing boat and come back with some of those? And of course, charter boats were needed for these. And of course, more money and economy going up. And if you're a little restaurant up here in the Northern Peninsula, everything is now you got people coming to your lake, to your community. Well, he wrote a book about his experience with this. And here's where we're going to end in the next minute. So now everything's looking good. You got 20 years of all the big salmon, the fish has come up, billions of dollars we're making. Well, I'm here to tell you, all of a sudden, crashes again. Because the alewives all of a sudden go to. So when the alewives collapse, the salmon follow. Because alewives provide 90% of the Pacific salmon's diet. And you're going to find out in the next one that another invasive species was discovered 14 miles from my house that is going to tie very much into the story. The zebra mussels. And here's the alewife harvest. And I think I'm going to, in there, but we're going to talk about why the alewives died off. And that's what we'll pick up next time. And we'll talk about them, and then the new invasive species that's come in. It's going to make everything I've talked about look like a birthday party. So I'm serious. It's kind of scary. So I'm going to just skip ahead and just my last 2 slides. Those are fish stories from a different time, which we're going to do next time. So basically, Darwin is saying the struggle for survival of the fittest will win out at the expense of their rivals because they succeed in adapting themselves best to the environment. This is evolution in action, folks, all the stuff that I've talked about so far, and we'll be impressed more. And it's not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent that survives. We should pay attention to that. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. So, if you ask me, who's going to be around 5, 10, 100, 1,000, million years down the line? I got my money on the sea lamprey and the cockroach. It's from the Bible of ecology. So, the last thing, so if you or your friends or want to see the rest of this, I put the YouTube up, or if you want to take a picture of that, I'll leave it up. Because the next one builds on this one. And we'll talk about what happens in the next 40 years of my life in the Great Lakes and fish. And eventually, that's going to bring us back to Iowa. Isn't that going to be interesting? So, thank you for your time and attention, and I'll
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Looking forward to next week. Shells from Hell is the title of next week. Very uplifting. No, I'm looking forward to it. Excited to hear more about it. Just a couple plugs. Still this week on Friday, I want to call your attention. Oh, sorry, I see someone taking a picture. I'll move to the side. Friday, I want to call your attention to our 9 a.m. Coffee with the College. We have an alum coming back who is one of the leading, he's a leader in the tech industry. He's going to be on campus, but having a conversation with us intentionally Friday, Coffee with the College, about AI and how we see that on college campuses. So I think it's going to be an incredible talk for us to listen to and to welcome an alumni back. It's going to be here in this space, 9 a.m. on Friday. There's a poster out in the entryway if you want to take it to remind you. It's the Coffee with the College on Friday. JR, help me thank JR one more time for his presentation today. Thank you everyone so much for being here and have a great rest of your day.